Without further ado, we would like to hand over ceremony to the chair speaker, Amadina. Assalamualaikum and a very pleasant morning to everyone present this hall. Welcome to today's final round for debate session for the Manchester Intellectual Debate 2015. Before we start with today's debate, I would like to invite the speakers from both teams to introduce themselves, starting from the government, followed by the opposition.
Good morning, I'm Brian from the government team.
Good morning, I'm Kevin, I'm the second speaker.
Good morning, I'm Arvin from the second speaker.
I'm Aris, I am the first speaker of the opposition.
Hello, Adam, second speaker.
Hello, I'm Muhammad Shaikh Firdaus, third speaker.
Thank you. Today's motion is this House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Prime Minister from the government team with his speech.
Good morning. Alright, I would like to bid my respect first of all to the Madam Speaker, the esteemed adjudicators, my teammates, the respected members of the opposite team, precise and accurate timekeeper, and the members of the floor. Today, we as the government party would like to accept this motion that this House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy. Okay. I, as the first speaker, will be responsible to state the case line, parameters, and also stating 1 point. My second speaker will state 2 points at the same time rebut 1, and my third speaker will rebut all 3 points given by the opposition party. Okay, so the case line that I would like to say in this particular motion is that PT3 is the first step to the right direction to support our education philosophy. Alright? I have to emphasize on this, it is the first step, okay? The parameter that we are setting today is that PT3 is still in the infancy period and we should look at PT3 in terms of a long run, and there's no doubt that PT3 is in fact in line with our education philosophy. Now, the question that we are asking, what is PT3? Okay. Well, PT3 is a new education system implemented in the 2013 to replace PMR, and this will carry on up to 2025. For now, it may change in the future, but our expected time frame will be up to 2025. It is a school-based assessment, and it is moderated by external appraisers. Now, PT3 has a really one special thing about it is that there's assessment and coursework, community service, and it ends with a written examination. Now, this particular thing that I will, no thank you please. Well, it has coursework and community service, which is something I would like to say that it deserves a credit. Well, coursework and community service, it allows the student to actually know what they are doing and experience what the world is it is today, because what PMR has been doing is just allow students to be in the room doing examinations. Sorry, no thank you. So PT3 gives community service and coursework assessment as well, allows the student to engage in the external environment, to know what the world is actually. So that's one thing that it deserves credit, okay? And well, exams are designed by PPD, which is the Pejabat Pendidikan Daerah. And okay, and while these exams are moderated by the external appraisers, which removes the biasness of this system, and it is no doubt once again in line with our education philosophy. Okay.
Yeah, I start.
Yes, please.
You know that it's actually a two system. It's PBS and PT3. PT3 is examination. It's Form 3 examination. PT3. Letak saya tingkatan 3. It's not PBS. PBS is a whole different thing.
Yes, PT3 is in fact for the examination, but that doesn't mean that we should discount what is offered because PT3 is the whole system, including PBS. Alright? So, okay, in terms of our points that I would like to say today is that, well, PT3, okay, PT3 comprises of one thing, it is written in the, what you call the blueprint for the PT3 is that it involves critical thinking skills, moving towards a more holistic subjective test and soft skills. And I would like to go on with the definition now. Okay, definition in terms of this motion today is that PT3, that I have explained, in the country is in Malaysia, and the education philosophy. Well, education philosophy, I would like to quote this particular thing. The country's education philosophy is that education in Malaysia is an ongoing effort towards, remember, ongoing, towards further developing the potential of individuals in a holistic and integrated manner so as to produce individuals who are intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and physically balanced and harmonious based on a firm belief. Okay, this is actually, like I say, PT3. It allows the student to actually go for critical thinking skills, moving to a more holistic, which is exactly in line with our education philosophy today. And, well, PT3 comprises of the examination, the written examination. And for this written examination, it is learning in a group, which allows us to, for the students to be less individualistic and learn more in terms of a group so that they can actually engage with one another. No, thank you, please. So when they engage with one another, it actually allows them to learn better because based on studies, engaging with one another. Okay, so in terms of the critical, sorry, no thank you. Okay, the critical thinking skills. Okay, this is something new before PMR, but PT3 allows you to have new critical thinking skill. It is more involved with the world nowadays, alright? Like world as in today's is not just about a fixed set of knowledge that you have. You have to change, improvise to know what you are doing and make sure that it is in accordance with the things today. So critical thinking skill in the new PT3, it actually allows you to learn and engage with the world. So that is my point. And for that, I would like to end as a first speaker by stating the case line again that PT3 is in fact just the first step to the right direction to support our education philosophy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian, the Prime Minister. Now, I would like to invite the opposition leader, Haris, with his speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning I to Nani, the educators, as well to everyone in this hall. Now, I'll begin my speech by first rebutting the points coming forth from side government. I would first like to do a factual rebuttal towards the facts they actually brought forth. And you can trust that we are well informed because Mamu actually WhatsApped 3 of his English teachers last night, and that was very good. You can actually check his phone after this, but you may not like what you find. Okay, so firstly, what they said about PBS was that PBS is something which is actually moderated externally. But the thing is, how PBS works is that the Lembaga Peperiksaan will always come up with a set of questions every year. And it is up to the discretion of the teachers in the school to actually choose what questions to actually take. And upon choosing the questions to take, they will examine it. And of course, the teachers will always be moderated, as in they check whether the teachers are actually doing their jobs professionally. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, it is examined inside, and it's not something which is moderated externally. It's just a factual rebuttal.
What are the
And next, next PT3 is actually examination over the course of 8 months.
POI, sir.
Denied. The questions will be released on February, and they have until October to actually answer all these questions. And it's done over the course of a period. For example, if you're doing sejarah, you need to do a coursework. If you're doing English and Bahasa Melayu, you will have to do oral questions and etc. And PT3 are all subjective questions. And yeah, that is what PT3 is. And in contrast to what PBS is a system in Form 1 and Form 2. PBS is something like continuous assessment of the students set up by the school, and it's something that's very vague until to this very day, because PBS is up to the discretion of the schools. That's why PBS, there's still a lot of meetings and etc. as in what community service to give to the students, and it's still something in its infancy. And there's a stark difference between PT3, the exams, as well as PBS, which is the learning system, which is still in its infancy, decline. Next, our duty as opposition, Mr. Speaker, is to prove to you how PT3 is not holistic, and how in the end it actually fails the country's education philosophy because it does not train individuals who are in the end holistic. And also, when I look at the case line coming from state government, I see that they are trying to say that the case line is basically that PT3 is the first step in order to support the country's education philosophy. I have to say that when we're talking about this debate, it is whether or not PT3 supports or does not support the education philosophy. When we're talking about taking the first step towards supporting the country's education philosophy, where do we draw the line? Is buying a lot of blackboards a step towards supporting the country's education philosophy? Where do we draw the line? What is the yardstick for this? So in the end, you can say a lot of things are steps towards improving the country's education philosophy, and that is relevant in today's debate. Today's debate is to determine whether or not PT3 supports or does not support the country's education philosophy. And it's easier for the government to say that it is a step, because what doesn't count as a step? Yes.
Are you discounting that PT3 being a step in the right direction, discounts it from supporting the education philosophy? How can it be a step in the right direction if it does not support the education philosophy in the first place?
Yes, because actually we are going to criticize the inherent problems of actually having the PT3 system, because PT3 system as a system is imperfect, and my second speaker will show you that how PT3 is a failed system, and due to it not actually supporting the country, due to it failing people despite it being a step towards the right direction, due to it actually failing to develop students, it does not support the country's education philosophy. Even though it's a step, even though they're trying to improve, it is failing. Now, I will move on. Our split is, I as a first speaker will be talking about how the PT3 system is not holistic, and my second speaker will be talking about how the PT3 system is the distortion of the student education system, and it also burdens the system. And due to these 2 points, it shows how PT3 fails to support the country's education system. Now, moving on to my first point about how PT3 is not a holistic system of education. Now, PT3 is done very quickly. It is done over the course of 8 months, Mr. Speaker. I took IB before, and it was done over the course of 2 years. There was not a lot of assessments, but I almost died. But maybe it's because I take a lot of data. But when you look at it, Mr. Speaker, PT3 is not holistic because it's too fast. It's done over the course of 8 months, and you're supposed to answer oral questions. You're supposed to do a lot of subjective questions. You're supposed to focus on a lot of things at once. So in the end, Mr. Speaker, we see that there is no actualization within these students. They do not actually have the time to actually get into what they are learning. They're just doing it for the sake of finishing it quickly, efficiently, and as bestly as possible. And we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that once you only give 8 months for them to finish so many, a broad range of things, ranging from oral tests all the way to physical examinations, denied. Please. Then we see that due to this short amount of time, that in the end, the students cannot achieve a holistic education because they are just chasing in order to get good results. Next, Mr. Speaker, we see that PT3 also becomes less enjoyable, Mr. Speaker, because once it's over the course of 8 months, learning is supposed to be an enjoyable experience. What the Malaysia's education philosophy is supposed to do is to actually help students to actually enjoy their education, and thus that way they can actually achieve holistic education. And we see that once we actually implement something like PT3, which is done over the course of 8 months, learning becomes less enjoyable for the speaker and thus it's no longer holistic. And due to that, we see that because PT3 is not holistic, it does not support the country's education philosophy. Now I'm going to summarize what I said. I said that the case line of the government is too simple because they're saying it's a step towards the right education, it's a step towards the right direction, but in the end, what constitutes as a step towards the right direction? And I believe that today's today's debate should be whether or not PT3 supports the country's education philosophy or not. And we on side opposition are going to bring forth the case that PT3 does not support the country's education philosophy because it is a flawed system. And with that, I am proud to end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Haris. I will pass the floor to Kevin with his speech.
A very good morning to esteemed educators, precise timekeeper, my fellow teammates, Madam Chair Speaker, my worthy opponents, and most of all members of the floor. Today I'll be speaking as the second speaker of the government party, and today's motion is this House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy. First of all, I would like to rebut the first POI by the opposition party, in which they said that PT3 is only an assessment, it's only a test, and PBS is something else altogether. And I would like to point out that PT3 is actually a part of PBS. It's an idea born out of the school-based assessment. PT3 is part of PBS. That is a fact.
On the point.
No thanks. And I move on to their first point. They said that PT3 is not holistic. It is a failed system. And quoted, even though it is being improved, or even though it is being improved continually, it will ultimately fail. That is what the first speaker has been stating before this. And he said that it is because it is due to PT3 is conducted under a short amount of time, of 8 months, and this caused the learning to become less enjoyable for the students because they do not enjoy the entire process of learning, and therefore making it not holistic. That is the sole argument that they have brought up by the first speaker of the opposition party. Let's think about it. A short amount of time causing learning to be less enjoyable and therefore making it not holistic. As the second speaker of the government party, I don't see the flow in thought in that logic. And which brings me to my first point and my team's second point as the second speaker today. PT3 supports our education philosophy in that it makes teacher as a bigger part of our education system. It makes teacher as professionals. It makes them more involved in educating students. And this is a very good thing. When you think about it, previously, our education system has been solely focused on the exam formats, on the syllabus that our government has been providing the students. And this has been a very misled way of education. Yes, please.
Don't you think that giving teachers extra workload without any other incentive will deter them from doing a good job in the first place?
Which is exactly what I was saying. We are viewing teachers as professionals now. We are using teachers as the true education tool instead of previous case. Previously, students are educated and guided by exam format, by syllabus alone. This is a fact that we should all know from our previous experiences in high school as well. Everything is based on the exam formats. It's based on past year paper. There's no true learning. There's no true education by the teachers. What they do is just to teach us what is in the textbook, memorize what is in the textbook, and do well in the exams. There's no true education in that system. And it goes against our education philosophy. Yes, please?
Since we already have the first PDP last year, right? Meaning we already have the marking scheme. What confirmation would you have that the teachers wouldn't gear the students to memorize the marking schemes?
Yeah.
The difference between PT3 and PMR is that they do not. PT3 is assessment. I admit to that. Yes, it is an assessment, but it's an assessment born from SBA, our school-based assessment system. In that, there's a set of questions set up by the government, given to the school. The teachers are allowed to set the questions, pick a few from the entire set of questions, and give out to the students. And in that process, they teach the students what they need to know. Teachers are given more work, more focus on the education of the student in the process. And this is also in accordance to the Education Blueprint 2013 to 2025 as well. Everything is done according to the philosophy of our country's education, philosophy. Moving on to my second point, which is it provides a more transparent and a more consistent marking systems in our grading system and a more transparent review of results for our students. PT3 does that because it actually gives the student back the papers and let them know the process of the marking, where they went wrong, and the teachers are allowed to discuss with the students after that, what are their feedback, what are their response on how the student has done, which is not seen in the previous education system, which I see is a good thing because it is the right step. It is a first step. It is a very transparent effort by our education ministry in implementing P3 today. It has received a lot of feedbacks. No thanks. It has received a lot of feedbacks from our teachers in the previous year where the first P3 is implemented. But I say it is the right thing. We must get used to it because it is the right way. 80% for an A is the right way for the grading system. We should not go back to the PMR grading system where everything is based on, we must have a fixed amount of excellent students every year, and we should manipulate the results in order to get more A's, in order to increase the performance of a certain school. P3 eliminates all that. It eliminates the possibility of the school itself to manipulate the results, because 80% for an A is the right way to do it. And this in turn follows our philosophy as well, because it produces students who are more competitive globally in terms of intellectual and knowledge. And going back to my first point, teachers are more engaged, teaching them, educating them every single day. Everything not based on strict exam formats like before. This gives them a holistic education in terms of knowledge as well as engagement. Knowledge and engagement. And that for me is a very important aspect in education. The involvement of teachers and the grading system as a whole in terms of feedback, response, and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Now, I would like to invite Adam, the Deputy Position Leader, with his speech.
Basically, we're debating on most of this House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy. But Mr. Speaker, we believe that PT3 in its essence does not support the education philosophy, Mr. Speaker. Now, before I start with my points, I would like to rebut the points given out by the second speaker and tell you in essence what we're talking about. We're talking about today that PT3 is an effort by the government to support the education philosophy, but the job of the government side today is to prove that even though it's an attempt, it's failed, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to point out a factual error in their sense. They're claiming that PT3 is about having more engagement, having fun. They're painting a picture as if we're going to have fun in the classroom. But the thing is, the cruel reality is, we're going to have 10 subjects, Mr. Speaker, and we're still going to be tested on those 10 subjects. It's not changing, except that we're adding more workload in a limited amount of time in the span of 8 months. And that's the thing that's happening. But the government side is not telling you this. They're hiding the truth, and they're sugarcoating the arguments.
You answer?
No? Hang on. On second point, and say they're going to say how it's more transparent and teachers are more engaged. In my point, I'm going to explain about how, first of all, it distorts the student education system, and third, it burdens the system. The first point in which they're saying it's going to be more transparent. To be honest, teachers and students, they meet each other every single day. So they have an emotional attachment. They're going to be emotional attached. Compared to PMR before, where they have separate educators who are detached from students, there is no emotional attachment. So I see something that is more transparent than the current evaluation system. In terms of engagement, I've already said this in my POI by saying that teachers have more workload. They're going to do a lot of things. So in this sense, they're trying to justify how when teachers, they have a lot more work to do, they're going to be more engaged in students. What kind of logic is that?
Your answer.
Okay.
Is the deputy leader of the opposition stating unequivocally that the teachers who are given more workload are in fact given more workload without any incentive at all?
Yes, they're not getting more pay.
That's a factual error.
Okay. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go to my points today. Today on how it distorts the student-teacher relationship system. Okay, I'm going to explain on 2 points on how first it distorts student education experience and it distorts the teacher educating experience. Now, first of all, when students come to school, they come to learn, they come to be educated. Now, the thing is, when we have PT3 for the span of 8 months, they have a lot of things going on in their minds. Believe me, I did IB for 2 years, I had a lot of things. Now they're giving 10 subjects for students to do in 8 months. That is a whole lot of burden for students in the first place. Now let's look at a more detailed aspect. In retrospect, PMR only had 1 examination, and you had 3 years to prepare for that. But PT3, you have only 1 year to prepare for every single thing. So at the same time, when you're doing community work, you're doing oral tests, you're doing physical examinations, you still have to study as well. And that is a lot of burden given that the person undergoing this process is a 15-year-old. Now people doing IB, they do it 18, 20. These 15-year-olds are subjected to this system for 8 months. Imagine the pressure and burden. So there are 2 possible outcomes for this. First of all, students might ignore the learning experience. They choose not to engage in PT3. Why should I? Because even if they do feel PT3, what's the worst that could happen, Mr. Speaker? They have not acknowledged that. Secondly, they could be more focused in actually just passing PT3 and not enjoying the learning experience. And this is why we say it's not holistic, because they're just focusing to pass, to get the required marks to go to a better school. That's what they're doing. It's not being educated. And in terms of mentality, mental aspect of the student, they're having a lot of burden, like I said before. So is this not going to affect how they are going to be educated when they're focusing on that? On the second level of my argument today, in which it distorts the teacher experience. Now, I've said before that teachers are going to have a lot of work. They're basically going to choose the exam questions. They're going to mark it. They're going to be writing reports for all the students to be recommended to other schools. That's a lot of work. And do they get increased pay? We do not know. Is it worth the pay? Because we need to understand the main role that teachers play in education system is to educate. Now what we're doing, which I say it does not support the education philosophy, I've read the blueprints. It said how we need to increase the desirability of teachers to be in the system in the first place. Now when we give teachers a lot of work, do you think people will be motivated to do a better job of teaching or just doing their job? Secondly, will this actually increase the desirability of young people to actually become educators? Because when they come to become educators, they're not here to become examiners, they're not here to become clerks, they're here to educate. But with the existence of PT3, they're going to do everything under minimum wage. And this is why we say that it doesn't support the education philosophy. In essence, they're trying to say that teachers are going to be more engaged. I say that's BS. I say that, so now. Because teachers are not going to have more time. Okay, on to my third point, in which I'm going to say it's the weakness of the system in terms of transparency. First of all, when teachers are marking their papers, we already see that there is going to be an emotional attachment to the students themselves. Students who are doing less well, teachers have an emotional bias. This is not evident in previous exams, but they're introducing PT3 in this. And there's also another bias that could happen, because We're introducing PT3 in the Malaysian mentality right now, where schools need to become excellent. So there is a lot of pressure for teachers to make sure the students get proper results. And that does not include making sure the students are educated, that just includes getting better results. And we see from this aspect, we see that this weakened system for PT3 is not actually going to create more students who are better educated. Maybe it's going to get good results on paper, but to the extent of supporting the education philosophy, we believe that is totally wrong. With that, I beg to propose.
Very good morning. I would like to wish the Honourable Madam Speaker, the ever precise and accurate timekeeper, the esteemed panel of judges, my commendable comrades of the government team, the equally worthy members of the opposition team, and definitely not forgetting the attentive members of the floor. We are gathered here today, ladies and gentlemen, to debate on the motion this House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy, and as a part of the government team, I would like to strongly suggest that this House accepts this motion. In conjunction with our support of this motion, we have come up with a case line that is, PT3 is the first step in the right direction to support our education philosophy. And as the government whip, it is my sole responsibility to rebut all the points brought forth by the second and first speaker, and of the opposition team I mean. And I'll start off with the second speaker, moving on to the first. The second speaker stated that, he started by stating that he is a destroyer of our points. Well, sir, a little bit of an in-joke, I'm not a destroyer, I'm just a whip. Moving on, they keep comparing IB and PT3 and how IB is given 2 years and PT3 is given 8 months. Well, to be fair, you learn a lot more in IB than you do in Form 3 or PT3. If you say, of course you're going to need 2 years to learn in IB, and you can utilize a very short amount. No, thank you. You can utilize a shorter amount of time to learn the things that you do need to learn in PT3. That is the main difference between IB and PT3, ladies and gentlemen. Do not be swayed by this argument. Moving on. The third speaker's third point came in the last minute. However, it was expertly done. Thank you, sir, for that third point. However, I would like to state that it wasn't very clearly defined. You see, he said that there is an emotional attachment, but he forgets to mention that in the marking of the papers, there are also external appraisers coming in to view whether the teachers are being biased or not biased. If you had mentioned this at all in your debate, I must have missed it because I do not hear any of the external appraisers doing this. And this takes out the bias, ladies and gentlemen, that might exist with any emotional attachment in the markers of the papers, who are the teachers themselves. We understand that there might be bias. Of course there might be bias. There's bias in anything, of course. But with external appraisers acting as a check and balance system, the bias is reduced to a very small degree. Moving on. The second speaker also stated that you have only 1 year to prepare for PT3. And there must be a cognitive dissociation here, because what are you doing for Form 1 and Form 2 if you're not studying at all? I mean, you know you have PT3 in when you come to Form 3. And just as you knew there was Form 3 when you came to Form 3, there was PMR when you came to Form 3. So how are you not learning it in the first 2 years? It doesn't make any sense to me. No, thank you. Moving on, the second speaker also stated that there is a notion of holisticness in this approach, in that that there is in fact community service going on. He keeps on saying that there's too much burden on the students. Well, the whole point of PT3 being introduced is to view education as a more than exam-oriented thing. We are approaching education in a holistic way, whereby we teach them through coursework, through, 1 second, so I'll accept it, but just let me finish the point. Through coursework, and through, of course, community service as well. Yes, sir.
Do you think it's possible for 15 years to cope with that kind of stress in 8 months?
Well, as you prove that it is not possible to cope with the stress in 8 months, we are trying to teach them in a separated way. There are segmented ways to teach them. There's coursework, there's an emphasis on being a good person in community service, and there's also the education part in the exams. We are teaching them in 3 folds. in this sense, and the assessment is broken up in this sense. They are not learning everything at once. They are in fact segmented, and in this approach, they are actually becoming well-rounded individuals, which, as I remind you, is in fact in line with our national education policy, our national education philosophy, as stated in the Malaysian National Education Blueprint 2013 to 2025, which, as you may now have taken to be where we are now, because 2015 is in the middle of 2013 and 2025. Also, they keep going on about how the system has failed. Well, the system came into fruition in 2013. It's only 2015. There's still 10 more years to go in the blueprint. It is still in its infancy, and as a first step into realizing the holisticness of the approach of our education system, I believe, in fact, all three of us in the government believe that this is an undeniable fact. It is in fact improving upon what PMR already gave us. PMR gave us an exam-oriented field to education, but right now with PT3, we are in fact moving towards, ladies and gentlemen, moving towards a more holistic approach of education. And if I may reiterate again, education in Malaysia is an ongoing effort towards further developing the potential of individual. That is our country's education philosophy. It is an ongoing effort. There is no be-all and end-all. We will improve. We need to improve. And to just look at it in the first 2 years and say that it has failed completely is very unfair, in fact. Let me see. Moving on to the first speaker. The first speaker pointed out that PT3 is in fact not holistic, and there's no time, there's no actualization. Again and again, we say that it is in fact the first step into attaining this holistic approach, and that 8 months for a Form 3 education should be enough when you think about it. And you cannot compare it to IB again, because in IB you learn a lot more and there's more things to cover, of course. And as I would like to just state a small factual error, there are in fact two factual errors I would like to state before I end this speech. Number one is that they kept stating that teachers are not given incentives. That is wholly wrong, because if you follow our Malaysian National Education Blueprint, teachers are given more incentives now to be teachers, as in for their responsibility in teaching. If you deny that, then you're going against our Malaysian National Education philosophy, and I must question your nationality. Moving on, there was a second factual error, I must say, that the PT3 and PBS are two different systems. PBS is basically school-based assessment. What is PT3? A school-based assessment. You see, PBS is an umbrella term, and PT3 is one of the formations of this. There's also the taking out of UPSR for a school-based assessment, but that is part of a school-based assessment. We are here debating on PT3, ladies and gentlemen, not on PBS, but we must take into consideration that PT3 is part of PBS and hence works like the PBS. Before ending the speech, I would like to thank all of you for your time, and thank the opposition and government team, and of course the panel of judges. And I would like to reassert that this motion must be accepted by the House, in line with the case line that PT3 is acting as a first step to achieving a holistic education. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen.
I can speak like this. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm not comfortable with my hands holding things. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very pleasant morning I to all. Under the motion, this House believes that PTT supports the country education philosophy. Standing here as the third speaker of the opposition bench, I'm going to rebut all the arguments coming up from government side. I'm going to refer our case. Moving on to the first part of this debate, I'm going to clear up the mess they have said, right? First, they say that PT3 is a part of PBS. So I'm questioning you if this circle is a subset of another circle. Should you debate about the bigger circle or the smaller circle? You should debate on the smaller circle. That's my response, right? Okay, moving on to the rebuttal part. The rebuttal part of the third speaker, right? You mentioned something about IB and PMR, how learn so much in IB and learn a lot in PMR, right? But the thing is that let us compare IB and PMR, IB and PT3 itself. IB, even though it's 2 years, with all other forms of teaching and learning, but we only have these friends of mine only need to study 6 subjects. But for PT3, they need to study 10 particular papers to answer, right? So what's the quality in it? And then he mentioned something about teacher bias, right? He agreed to the fact that teacher is still going to be biased. That's the point that we are. That's the point that we are saying. You agree to the fact that teachers are going to be biased. You're giving them more work, and then you're giving them more pressure, and then you're giving them the power to mark these papers. What are you implying is that you are encouraging them to be biased, because at the end of the day, they are the one who will be teaching these students, and they are the one who's going to be judged by the schools. We compare with other teachers with other schools. If the result of the schools get lower than its original stage, right? Wait. And then he said something about he found no point, no direct link on we saying that on the first 2 years of Form 1 and Form 2 they learn nothing. So the thing is yes, because Form 1 and Form 2 they are being catered by the PBS system, by the SBS system, like what I've said, because we have continuous assessment in PBS. PBS system they give bands to students. I've been teaching in my school for 3 months after A-levels, and I know this stuff because I was the teacher. Ooh, okay. They have different sets of questions given to different band of students. If this students is band 1, this students is band 6. Band 6 is better than band 1, but band 1 by the way. So band 6 students will get continuous assessment questions more tougher than the band 1 students. So to cater the students according to BPI system for Form 1 and Form 2, and when they come to Form 3, you have to cater them for all the coursework for geography, coursework for history, that is only for PT3, meaning they start learning and start working for PT3 at Form 3 itself, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and then they got something about, and then he mentioned something about still moving, how it is still a moving step, first step. If I want to go up there, if my first step is this way, how is it justified, right? By saying that PT3 is first step, that's what we are trying to do. We are telling you that even if it is a first step, it's not in the right direction. And then lastly, he said something about teachers will be given more incentive. He didn't even mention what incentive teachers are given. And if the teachers are given more incentive, so you have been given them large burden of work, and it's fair enough to give them incentive, but he didn't actually link it to any how does it support the national education philosophy. Okay, enough with the third speaker, right? Moving on to the second speaker. Sorry. Okay. Before I move on to the second speaker.
You are aware that the first speaker just stated that without incentives, the teachers won't be motivated to work, and yet when I counted that, you counted that by saying, well, incentives won't do anything at all. You're contradicting your first speaker, sir.
No, I'm not contradicting, because I'm saying that you haven't said anything when you say that the teachers will be given incentive. The teachers, if the teachers are given incentive, it's like what my first speaker have said. If you want them to do more work, you have to give them more incentive. But the thing is, you're already giving them more work. That is what the need of you giving them incentive. The thing is, they will still be pressured, right? Okay, moving on to the second speaker. What he said that, okay, his whole argument is under the case of on how teachers will be more engaged in the learning. My first response to this, with entering class every day, what more engagement do you want? My second response to this is that the only more job that he mentioned that the teachers will do is that the teachers got to choose questions and mix match them and will teach students what they need. And in a way making them holistic. Ladies and gentlemen, no link at all. But then at the end of the day, he did mention something about teachers teachers discussing exams in the context of PT3 itself. I give you, for the whole PMR that I sit for, I have midterm examination, I have a pre-term examination, I have mid-year examination. We have lots of examination, and teachers did go through each and every examination. Compared to PT3, only one time examinations, right? So if you want to compare, PMR is better than PT3. So why you change to PT3 if you are talking about discussing exams, right? But at the end of the day, my first response is that you agree to the fact that exams are going to be the one that is going to be focused right here. You agree to the fact that teachers are going to teach the students based on marking schemes, right? I give you a simple analogy. You are teaching a cooking class, right? And the exams is to cook nasi lemak, nasi ayam, or nasi minyak. So with PMR system, you are giving students, okay, how to cook nasi lemak, how to cook nasi minyak, how to cook nasi ayam. So every student actually know how to cook these things. Now you say that the students are only geared to cook nasi lemak, nasi minyak, nasi ayam. So we change lah. We do something like cook nasi lemak and add some more desserts with all the. But at the end of the day, the students will be, the gearing system will change to be gearing towards what they want to assess, which is nasi lemak and all the desserts, right? At the end of the day, it is still going to be about PT3. It's still going to be about exams. That is what my second speaker have told you. That if it's about exams, but you're still giving them coursework, you're giving them all the voluntary work and stuff like that, how are you going to expect the student to study and focus on this exam at the end of the day? To learn as a holistic student itself, right? So 10, 20, 30. I've already been all the speakers and the arguments. So let us reaffirm on this. What have I told you, right? What have I proven to you? That PT3 does not support the education system. We have shown you because it is not holistic. How is it not holistic? Because it is done in a very short term of time, and it does not cover any other aspect because it is about examination at the first place. And we show you on how even if it is like even if the students learn, right? Because we already proven to you that students will somehow not learn because of the pressure and because of all the other things that you give them. Even if they learn, right, the pressure you put on the teachers and stuff like that, this makes the system very inefficient. And with this inefficiency, we see that you will not reach the output that you want, which is a holistic student. When the output is not reached, we see that the first step that you are taking is not supporting what you want to, the destination that you want to reach. That is what I'm saying, right? So the bishop has fallen. Checkmate. Thank you.
Thank you, Firdaus. To all speakers, you have 1 minute to prepare your reply speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning and welcome to the reply speech arena. What I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the key arguments coming from their side, key arguments coming from our side, how we have clashed with theirs, and the minutes with their victorious, how they have tried to dance around us and refuse to clash with us, and why they lost and why we won. Now firstly, I'm going to talk about the points coming from their side and points coming from our side. Now I talked about how when you have PT3, it's going to be less holistic due to the short amount of time and people not actually enjoying the learning experience. And then my second speaker has talked to you about the pressures, due to pressures as well as how the teacher-student relationship will actually deteriorate. Now, when we see the engagement coming towards us, they have actually failed to actually say how to prove how this will not actually deteriorate the student and teacher relationship when teachers actually receive more burden. And also when they talk, and their points was about how when we have the PT3 system, all of a sudden learning will be less individualistic. But yet, when their points were more or less similar with what's happening right now, because they said about how it's going to be less individualistic is because people are going to learn in groups. But I learn in a classroom. Is that not a group? And people are engaging each other in classrooms because we are also asking questions. And so we see that their point about how it's going to be less individualistic is sort of false because it's sort of the same as what's happening now. Because all they said is because students will learn in groups and students interact with each other, which is already what's happening right now. And then they talked about how there will be more engagement between students and teachers. They actually failed to actually clarify how there is going to be a true engagement. All they said is because teachers will mix and match the questions, and then they will, and then all of a sudden they will try to somehow engage the students more about this. Now we talked to you about how when this happens, there is this element of gearing. How the teachers will actually gear the students to actually answer certain questions. Next, they also talk about the grading and the transparency and about response and all that. And we counteracted this by saying that there will be a form of biasness involved. and they considered to the fact that there will be biasness involved, yet it will be reduced biasness. And I ask you, Mrs. Speaker, which is the best system? A system where there is no biasness, or where biasness exists, despite it being very small. So in the end, Mr. Speaker, we have talked to you about how PT3 is less holistic. It takes so little time to do so many things, and also how it weakens the student-teacher relationship, and how teachers are put under more pressure, and thus becomes a failed system. So even though it's a step in the right direction, it is a failed system, and thus does not support the country's education philosophy. And with that, I am proud to end my speech. Thank you.
I'll be speaking as the second speaker of the government party, and I'll be giving a reply speech. I'll be summarizing my team's points, summarizing the opponent's points as well from the opposition party, and I'll be doing and I'll give everyone something to bring back home today to think about what PT3 is all about. Let's go back to the motion. This House believes that PT3 supports the country's education philosophy, our country's education philosophy. And let me bring you to the attention of the first point brought up by the opposition party, which is say it's not holistic, and the system will fail. And I say to that, it is an ongoing process, and I've mentioned it again and again. PT3 is a whole new thing compared to PMR, compared to all the education system we had before this. It involves coursework, it involves a lot of other works. They have been calling that distraction for the students, not focusing on their studies, causing them to fail in their studies. But I say no. Coursework, community service, and assessment, strict, challenging tasks to do within a very short period of time is all part of education, and a very holistic education. This is part of education. Why do you complain about I have a very big workload in a short amount of time? We see that in our course every day in the uni. Like we are in university now, and we see that every day. We have to cope with deadlines. We have to be flexible. We need good teachers to guide us, which is why we have tutor sessions and lectures all separately. EBL sessions, tutor groups with your professors, EBL sessions where you go in a smaller group with your fellow students, with your fellow peers, and lecture hall where you engage with your teachers to go on the academic stuff. That is all education is all about. And PT3 is trying to duplicate that system. And it is a good direction, and it goes in accordance to our education philosophy. There's no denying that. Therefore, the first speakers from the opposition point that it is not holistic, the system is failing, it's not valid at all, because I don't see that, the logic that PT3 is trying to do everything against the system which is solely exam focused, is trying to do away with all that. Is the ultimate proof that it is trying to be holistic. It is a right direction for our education, in the direction of our education philosophy. Moving on to their second point. They mentioned that it distorts our educating experience. It puts a lot of workload on teachers. It causes them, and connecting to that third point of health, it's not transparent and all this. And I say to that, teachers are professionals. What we need is better trained teachers. We should not question the mistakes that PT3 is putting a lot of workload on teachers, because we should understand, we should change the notion that teachers are supposed to educate the students. Emotional attachment, they blame emotional attachment. I say emotional attachment can be a good thing if applied correctly. Reports on personal students, that is a good thing. Teachers are supposed to know their students well and give feedback. Not, because of emotional attachment, they might be biased, give them extra marks. That's not what a good teacher should do. So that is solely the problem of whether the teachers are well trained or not. The problem does not lie with PT3. PT3 still goes in accordance to the education philosophy of our country. And our points focus mainly on the holistic manner, on the engagement of the teacher, and all all the transparency, all the feedback response you get from the students, from their coursework, leading from the coursework to their community service, to the learning process of the entire 3 years leading up to PT3. This is the idea that PT3 is trying to convey. This is the idea that PT3 is trying to support, is trying to promote. The learning process, they focus on the learning process, what the students learn, what they can gain from there, and what feedback and what response they can get in order to build them up more as a student, which is a right way, which I think is a right way to educating our students in the future. And I think that PT3 is correct, it's a right way. It's a step that our government has taken, which is correct in supporting our country's education philosophy. Thank you.